Operation Fortune Ruse de Guerre, I'm sorry if I can't pronounce that right, is directed by Guy Ritchie and stars Jason Statham, Josh Hartnett, Aubrey Plaza, Hugh Grant, among others. And this story, it deals with a spy named Orson Fortune who is having to obtain this stolen device that gets obtained by Hugh Grant's character, who's an arms dealer, before he can get sold to the highest bidder, before he can get sold to the highest buyer. And along the way, there's some other things that go unexpectedly, as their mission involves also having to recruit a movie star that's played by Josh Hartnett. Now, here's a little backstory. Now, this movie was directed by Guy Ritchie. That I've seen some other films of his that I've enjoyed, like a couple years ago when he brought Wrath of Man, and he also did the one that I haven't seen all of, but I saw most of it, which is Snatch, and then some of the other ones I've seen too, like The Gentleman, which I really enjoyed. But I do need to check out some more of Guy Ritchie's other works, because it seems like a lot of movies I've seen so far of his have been really great. The only ones I haven't really cared too much for so far is just King Arthur, but I haven't seen a lot of his other ones, like the two Sherlock Holmes movies, or even some of his earlier stuff, like Lock, Stock, and Two Barrels, or I forgot what it was called. But a lot of his early crime movies and stuff. So I really need to go check out some more of his early works. But I am really curious to see what he does with his movies, because he always seems like he has a great style that I really enjoy with a lot of it, especially with a lot of witty dialogue. That's basically the equivalent of, well, in a nice way, he's like the equivalent of like the British Quentin Tarantino, so to speak. But going into this film, it got me curious, because not only did I really like to see how this cast that they had stacked for it, but also just the whole like kind of spy angle that he was kind of taking. It kind of reminded me of that movie he did a few years ago called, some years back, called The Man from U.N.C.L.E., which I haven't seen, but I heard it's on that kind of level, which in of itself, that movie I heard was also based on a spy TV series. So I could see like something like this. It seems like it was Guy Ritchie's kind of foray into doing like a old school Mission Impossible type movie. Like the early days, more so I think based off of the original series or something like that. They're like the early Mission Impossible movies. And so with this one coming out, it got me interested, but it seemed like it was going through some trouble behind the scenes, because it got a lot of delays going along, because it was supposed to come out last year, but there was some controversy I heard to where they kind of had to not really release it for a while due to some things going on with the Russian-Ukraine war, and because in the movie they have it to where some of the villains that are in the film or portrayed are Ukraine, so I could see why they kind of had to push the movie back, and when it came out, it just kind of came and went. There wasn't really any marketing behind it. And so after upon seeing the film, I can say that I like the movie. It is fun to an extent, but it does kind of have some things that kind of fall back from being a great, but I still think it was still fun for the most part. So to get my pros out of the way, I thought the biggest things I really enjoy in this the most are the cast. I thought Statham is great as usual, him going back to what we know, what we see him as in a lot of his typical action roles. And he does have a lot of great funny one-liners that I always like, especially when he's, killing bad guys and stuff. It's what you expect in these kind of, with his kind of action guy persona. And then also the rest of the cast is really great too, especially Aubrey Plaza, who has that very snippy type of dialogue that she's known for, and a lot of her early comedy stuff that she was in. Because I heard that she's actually kind of become a lot more into dramatic works and stuff, but no, seeing her in other stuff that I remember seeing her before, and you could tell that she kind of still has that kind of snappy, very dry kind of humor that she does, or snippy kind of humor that she does, that I thought was really works in this level. And she was great. And then I also got a really big kick out of some of the other ones too, especially seeing Carrie Elways, back on the big screen again. And, as the guy that kind of handles the operation and stuff. And then the other two biggest standouts for me the most were Josh Hartnett and Hugh Grant. I thought they really stole a lot of their scenes that they were in certain aspects, especially with Hugh Grant playing, something that he kind of reminds me of his performance in The Gentleman, where, he's very suave and very, he's got that charisma that you see a lot of him in a lot of his other films, but he plays it in such a great way that there are a couple points too where he does come across as a little bit intimidating that I really bought. And so I thought he was great. And then the other one that I was really curious the most was Josh Hartnett, because ever since I saw him in Wrath of Man a couple years ago, it was great that Ritchie was able to put him in another film again, and seeing how he hasn't really been in movies for a while, it's great that he's getting kind of a comeback in Hollywood again. And with his character, it made me really curious because the fact that he was playing an action star that's getting basically swooped into the whole operation and everything, and just like I just wish that there's a con that I have to his character that I think they could have utilized him more with, but I still thought he was great as seeing him in this kind of role, and his character would have me the most like interested throughout, and so that was awesome. And then a lot of the other comedy and the way that they handle it too is very great, especially with like your typical Guy Ritchie dialogue where characters are saying certain lines to each other and stuff, the way they play off each other. I thought everyone had great chemistry together, and the action scenes as well, they're really well timed to the extent, and they're competently made. And there's even one sequence, well, two sequences actually. One of my favorite ones is actually this car chase that happens when they're going to later on in the film, and then also there's another sequence where it shows like the point of, where it's kind of shot in a certain angle that it's almost like seeing like it's almost like the equivalent of seeing it like on a GoPro kind of camera that I thought was really well choreographed, the way it went with the shootouts and stuff. So I thought that was great, and then just the way that it kind of goes into that kind of throwback to being a spy type of movie. It's good to see movies like this we don't see too often anymore, and so that was good. But I think, but as much as I was really getting into the fun, level of it going along with the movie, I did feel like, and this is where I get into some of my cons. What holds it back is that it is very generic for the most part as it goes along, because while I was getting to that first like couple 2/3 of the film where it was going into a lot of great fun moments, it does start to dive into where when the characters are pretty much having to roam around a lot around the world and everything, it starts to become like your typical action film, and it comes into a climax that I think could have been a lot better the way it played out, and it seemed like it really, could have went all in the way it was kind of doing its payoff. And so that I think really goes into, and there's a lot of other like twists and turns they do that I feel like have been there, done that, where I've seen in other films. And I won't go into spoilers, but there is also something that they do in the movie that kind of reminds me of one of the other Mission Impossible films. And so that I thought I could see a mile away coming and stuff. But, and then also I had an issue where the way that the movie goes along with it having to have this plot that's all convoluted and stuff, it did get me out of it to where I wasn't really interested as much as it went, because they kept trying to do twist after twist after twist and stuff, and it becomes a little out there with the way it's trying to do all this into one big, it's like basically seeing a lot of scenes basically jobbled together with the way that it's plotting along and stuff. And so it really, and that kind of falls into a lot with a lot of the characters themselves, where it's like the characters themselves are fun to watch mainly by the cast performances, but there really is no development, so to speak, of where they grow as, where you see them as characters throughout the film. I think the closest one that we might get to see perhaps is probably Josh Hartnett's character. But even then, it's like they kind of underutilize him to where he does have certain scenes that work in a lot of, what him trying to basically use his action movie star personality to try to, get into some stuff with Hugh Grant's character. But I think that they really could have used more of his character to take advantage of the situation as it calls for it. Because it seems like for a while in the second half, he's kind of sidelined to where we don't really see much of him or really having him do much. Because there's like a whole portion where he's basically sitting around and just basically, hanging out with Hugh Grant's character, and it seemed like that there could have been more opportunities to really showcase him as being this, famous action, this famous action star and stuff that he's known in Hollywood for, and so that was one of my other issues I had. But other than that, though, this is definitely one of those movies that it's not one of Guy Ritchie's best, but I still thought it was a fun time. And it's definitely one that I felt like it could have been a whole lot better, but I'm glad I at least got to check it out. And so with that, I'm going to give the movie a very extremely high average Joe on the Film Freaks meter. I would have gave it a low compelling, but because I did have some issues with the way that it's very generic at times with the plot, and a lot of it is what you see in countless other spy films and stuff, and a lot of the other aspects of the writing hold it back, I still think that it was a good time. And so for those of you who have also seen Operation Fortune, let me know in the comments below what you thought about it, and thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next review. I'll see you later.